Welcome in, everyone. I am Mike Pendleton. This new series is Inside the Cage on bjpenn.com. Here you'll find one-on-one interviews with myself and fighters from all over. We normally watch them fight inside the cage, but we'll bring this conversation as if it was happening inside the cage with no fights taking place. An in-depth conversation with your favorite fighters is right here, inside the cage with myself, Mike Pendleton. It's been way too long since I last talked to my next guest. We're probably going to go down so many avenues when we talk, especially because I had to remind him, now that we work together at SiriusXM, that he is Mystic Anthony, Mystic Lionheart. I mean, he predicted his next few fights after he beat Rashad Evans. He told me everything he was going to do, and then he went out and did it. He's a former UFC light heavyweight title challenger. He has an upcoming fight. We'll talk about that, given the coronavirus pandemic. He's the one and only Anthony Lionheart Smith. Anthony, thank you for joining me.
Hey, no worries, man. Anytime. It's been way too long.
It has been. I remember the first time you and I ever talked was Hector Lombard, and then we did the interview before Rashad, and ever since then I've just been working behind the glass for you at SiriusXM, and we'll get into that, but I think you do an amazing job in your broadcasting career, on that side of your career. I think you have a bright future in that and in the cage, but you have an upcoming fight. Let's get the chaos out of the way. You have an upcoming fight against Glover Teixeira on April 25th. It is supposed to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, a place that you told me. Let's see if I remember this correctly. You grew up, 9 miles away from the arena? You know, like, it's right in your backyard. What's the latest on this fight?
You know, it's kind of up in the air right now. It's not quite that close, but it's about 30 miles from where I live. I made my professional debut in that same city back in forever ago now, I guess. But it's up in the air, man. I don't know really. I don't know what's going to happen. Dana and Hunter assured me 100% that I would be fighting. And I think the location and venue and stuff like that, I think that's kind of up in the air right now, and I think that they're in the process of figuring that out. But it sucks. I really wanted to fight in Lincoln. I really want to. But, is it really fighting in Lincoln if the fans aren't involved? That's kind of the whole idea of fighting there. So, this whole coronavirus, pandemic it's just been tough on everybody. And I'm not going to sit here and cry and complain about it, because I think that I'm in a better position than a lot of people are in America and worldwide. So, I don't want to sound like, poor, pitiful me, but, I've fought my entire career to get to a point where I can headline an event in my home state, and I finally do it, and then get taken out by, and then it's going to get taken out by the damn coronavirus, So I'm not saying that my situation is worse than anybody else's, but it definitely hit me pretty hard here at home.
I can only imagine. I think you kind of put it in perfect perspective. What is it fighting in Lincoln if fans, I'm assuming family and everyone around you can't be there and there's no crowd there? You can't really feel that hometown energy. Are you at all optimistic that this fight will take place in Lincoln?
A little bit. I think if the state and the commission will allow it, I think that they can do it under a real special kind of circumstance, with limited production crews, maybe certain corner, a smaller cornerman group rather, and just keep it to 8 people in a room, in a locker room. Only your team is allowed in one locker room. There's ways we could do it. It just depends on what the state and the commission say,
Absolutely. Now, one thing I do love about you as a broadcaster and as a fighter is, I go back to the Hector Lombard fight, when you're asking Hector if he knows your name yet. And being on the shows that you work on MMA Tonight on SiriusXM, you never hold back. And I think there's a lot going on surrounding the UFC, these upcoming events, the postponement of these events, and Dana White. So as a fighter who has the opportunity to possibly fight at home, something you've longed for your entire career, but also going through this coronavirus pandemic, I guess it's a two-part question here. Are you in agreement with Dana doing all that he can to keep these fights going? And if you are, would you like to see some coronavirus testing in place for fighters like yourself and other fighters?
I'm obviously I'm going to look at this from a strictly selfish point of view. I do understand the risks that are involved, and I know that by putting myself at risk in certain circumstances, I am putting others at risk. But I think that there are some steps that you can take to minimize that and keep it as small as possible. Listen, I got friends that are Major League Baseball players, and there's guys that are in the NFL, and there's guys that are in the NBA. Those guys can sit and chill for a while and be okay. And of course they want to play. Of course they want to run out there and be out there in front of their fans and doing what they love to do. But financially, those guys are in a much better position than we are. I think our job is much harder. It's much more dangerous. It's much harder on our bodies. Our careers are much shorter. And we don't have a year just to sit around for no reason. We have to get paid. We have to fight, and Dana knows that, and he understands that. Like, if we can't get paid, like, we can't fight. Like I talked about this the other day. Like, training camps cost money, and we're out here, and if we're not fighting, we're not bringing in any money. So we're slowly burning through what we have. Not everybody can be like James Krause and be independently comfortable. Outside of that, it took him a long time to get to that point, and I've been out 10 months and then had 2 surgeries, and I got 3 kids and a wife that I have to take care of. I gotta fight, and that's just how it is. So, will I like to see some testing? I mean, I don't think that's really up to me. I think that there's a lot of people out there that need the test a lot worse than, like people in my position. Like, I'm healthy, I have no symptoms, I have no signs, but like if that's what it's going to take for them to for any commission or government entity or the state to allow it to happen, and we got to take the test, then fine. But I think we also need to realize that those tests could be better spent somewhere else.
Now, I saw your interview with ESPN, and I know you talked about what's next, for this Glover Teixeira fight or after this Glover Teixeira fight. First and foremost, what is your mindset, given all the chaos we just spent almost 10 minutes talking about? What is your mindset on facing Glover Teixeira next month?
I was actually really irritated by some of the headlines that came out after that ESPN interview. I just hate clickbaity sites, like, it's all clickbait, it's all BS. Like, the headline was Anthony Smith calls for title shot after Glover Teixeira win. If you go back and listen to that interview, I never said that. I actually said the opposite, that there's 2 guys that have a better stake to that title shot than I do right now, and so that I need to work. I need to keep fighting. So my whole point of what I was getting at was, like, it was about the Nebraska thing. Like, at some point in time after this fight, I know that I'm going to be challenging for the title again. And if I don't believe that I can beat John Jones, then what the hell am I doing here? So it's like these clickbait sites are like quoting me, like almost making fun of me for saying that I believe that I can beat John Jones. Well, if you're chasing a title and you don't believe that, what the hell are you doing in this sport? So, like, I don't understand the issues that I got with that. But regardless, to answer your question, my mindset is good, man. Like, I know that the rest of the world is in a really tough spot, and the rest of the world and our country is in a really tough spot right now. But we're very isolated here in Nebraska. Like, it's nothing for us to go an entire wintertime and not interact with people that you don't live next to or work with. It's just not. It's cold. It's freezing. Nobody goes outside anyways. There's not a whole lot to do. Like, we don't live in New York or LA or in California where you got the beaches, and we don't live in Colorado where there's a lot of trails and there's the mountains, and Like, there's not a lot to do. So, like, it's nothing to go an entire week and not see anybody that you don't live with. Like, that's fairly normal here. So we don't have a whole lot of cases here in Nebraska. And so Factory X is shut down, and the gym in Kansas City is shut down. But here, it's pretty much business as usual. We're just keeping the training partners, the amount of people in the gym at one time, keeping it, under 10 people or 10 people or under. So honestly, my training schedule hasn't really changed, like, except for not being able to travel to Denver back and forth. Like, it's pretty much business as usual for me. So I know that a lot of guys, again, I'm lucky, like a lot of people aren't in that same situation. And there's a lot of cities that are essentially dumpster fires right now, and things are getting out of hand, and hospitals look like war zones. And it's just, it's really sad. But for me, I'm very fortunate that my mindset is good. My training schedule hasn't changed at all. My training partners haven't changed at all. I haven't lost any training partners. I'm good here.
Would it be safe to say, and obviously, I want to go back real quick. I got to say, for those that are those clickbait sites, I think it's crazy because not only just by working with you on MMA Tonight, but I've heard you on the ESPN desk. I've heard you in interviews. I've heard you all over the place say the exact same thing. If I don't believe I can beat John Jones, what the hell am I doing this for? So I want to make that known, just because I've heard you say it so many times that it's not like you're just pulling this, for lack of a better term, you're not pulling this out of your ass. This is something you've been saying for a very long time, before the fight and then after the fight. You've never shied away from, this is exactly why you're doing it. But going back to, just yourself and everything that's taking place right now, one of the things that I wanted to mainly get you on this show about is to go away from all the hot topics. I know we just spent 10 minutes talking about it, but I just love your story, and I do think there could be so many things done on you. And I'm not just saying that because, I've worked with you and I've interviewed you a few times, but there could be a documentary on your career. There could be a book written about your story. I mean, if those that don't know it, you were there, you got cut, came back, moved up a weight class, challenged for the title. I know not the result you wanted, but now you've also turned that into an incredible broadcasting career on the ESPN desk, on SiriusXM. Have you ever looked back and thought, man, at one point they cut me, and now look where I am?
Only really in situations like this when someone else talks about it. I think a lot of it just has to do with how I was raised, and a lot of the stuff that I went through when I was growing up, and a lot of the adversity that I ran into, and a lot of it is the people that I surround myself with now. I've had my ups and my downs. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've had a kind of a rocky career at the beginning and midway point. But I just don't sit down and pat myself on the back, because I'm not done yet. And that's how I look at it. I know that sounds so cliche and so, so bullshit, but that's really how it is, man. I don't have a rear view mirror. I'm just looking forward, and I still got it. And I think it's because I'm not ever happy. I'm never content with anything. I'm always moving forward. It's always what's next. It's like, I don't even look back on some of my wins and think, oh man, that was so awesome. I can't believe that happened. Like, every once in a while there's a guy here and there that, like, it gives you that feeling, like fighting Rashad, there was a moment there I was like, holy shit, like, it's Rashad Evans, and then Shogun, and so, like, there's a couple of those moments where you just gotta, like, reflect for a second. But usually my reflection is before it happens. It's not afterwards. Then both in those two situations was right before the fight, like right before the referee said go. I had that quick moment of, holy shit, that's Shogun Hua standing across from me. We're about to fight. And then I just check it out. I just check out of that, and I just do what I got to do. But maybe someday I'll write a book or tell my story in more of a long form. But I think that I want to wait until I'm done and until I've accomplished everything that I possibly can. But for me, it's always one foot in front of the other. And when I win a fight, I don't really celebrate that fight. I celebrate the fact that we got in and we got out safely, and that, you know, a lot of it's relief that it's over and that I got it done. But I'm immediately in the UFC's ear, like, what's next? Let's go. Like, who's next? What do I got to do? What do I got to do to get back to a title shot? Who do I got to beat? You know, I'm just never happy, you know. And even with Sirius and with ESPN, like, you know, like, how do I get better? And how do I do a better job? And how do I captivate more fans? And what do the fans want to hear? And like, I don't really listen back to the shows patting myself on the back. I'm pointing out mistakes so I can get better. And that's just my mindset, and that's how I've always been.
Do you think part of that, and obviously you just said this is how you've always been, so I hope it doesn't negate my question, but do you think part of that is something, and someone we both know very well, he's been a guest on my podcast a bunch, is your coach, Mark Montoya, and his philosophy of, we're not fighting, go back to your title fight, we're not fighting John Jones. That's a problem standing across from us, and we have to go solve that problem. I'm sure you've heard him say that thousands of times. He said that to me plenty of times on here. Do you think part of your mindset where you're not looking back and you're not celebrating things, or just because you have a coach who is instilling to look at everything across from you as a problem and not a name or a figure?
Yeah, for sure. You know, and he evolved my mindset that I already had. You know, he was able to excuse me. He was able to, I don't know, maybe focus it better than maybe I had in the past. You know, like, before I met Mark, I was always just looking for better, but I never had a plan. You know, I was just trying to figure it out as I went. And Mark has categorized everything and kind of organized it better, I think, mentally for me. But that's exactly how we approach it. You know, and it's hard to celebrate a win when Mark Montoya is your head coach, and I don't mean that in a negative way. But there's so many things. I mean, in the Shogun fight, you know, he picked like 20 things apart that I did wrong. Well, when your mindset is like that, like, you're just never you're never sitting idle, because, like, as good as I felt about that win and as great as it was for my career, I made a lot of mistakes, and we got to cut those down as fast as we can. And that's kind of our mindset as a team. You know, and I know that sounds negative. I mean, there's always a moment of reflection where we can look at each other and be proud of each other, but it's very quick. It's very short-lived, and then we're on to the next thing. It's, your footwork could have been better here. You dropped your hand on this hook right there. You threw a naked kick here. You know, you got a little wild right there. Like, it's, you know, we can break a minute and a half fight down for an hour, picking apart mistakes, and I think that's where a lot of my growth has come in the last few years.
I think that's part of why I love you guys as a team. You know, because, and I would say, and this is something I've always wanted to ask you, I would say that celebration moment you guys get is usually in the locker room, because he's the one going on Instagram and posting videos of you guys dancing and singing and celebrating to Return of the Mac. Here's what I've always wanted to ask you. How did you get connected to that song? I understand it's a good song. Don't question taste. But what is it about that song?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm a feelings person, and fighting is a feelings thing. So, like, sometimes I think people pick songs that mean something to them, and there's lyrics in there that mean something to them, but it doesn't necessarily always get the crowd involved. And it's really about being with the crowd when I'm walking. You know, like, in that moment, I'm not like super hyper focused on the task in front of me. Like, I always make sure that I enjoy my walk to the octagon. I just always have. And when I get to the top of the steps, before I walk in, I flip the switch and I turn it on. And that's when it's go time. And I think that people can see that switch happen. But when I'm walking out, I'm really, like, I spend my whole time just looking and searching through the crowd, because I just want to enjoy those moments, because I think those are the moments that I'm going to miss when this is all done. I obviously the fights, you enjoy the fights, you enjoy winning, you enjoy the feeling of winning, but it's those moments when you're walking to the octagon, I think, that people forget to enjoy. So I was just driving to practice one time in the UFC, Heidi Dean texted me and said, "Hey, what do you want to use for your walkout song?" And Return to the Mac was on the radio when she texted me, and I was just bobbing my head. Like, you could just, like, you just feel good when you hear that song, you know? Like, you can't help but nod your head. And I was like, you know what, let's just use this one. So, and that's what I did, and now they won't even let me change it because now it's connected to me. And people know when they hear that song, like, Anthony Smith is walking out. So I don't remember the first time I used it, but I haven't been able to change it since. And I remember when I was fighting Shogun, I used it. I remember thinking, like, oh, man, I should have done something a little different because people in Germany aren't going to, like, rock to this song, right? And I was blown away when I came through the curtains, and that entire, you know, Hamburg, Germany crowd was just bobbing and weaving and bumping around and nodding their head, and they were dancing. And, like, it's cool to see people's reaction when I think they're expecting, like, super hardcore rap music or rock music or something that's, like, super meaningful, like, personally to the fighter. And then when they hear something that they can just get into that just makes you feel good, like, I think people enjoy that.
Just a couple more here for you, talking to Anthony Lionheart Smith, and I really appreciate your time. I got to ask, like, obviously we've kind of talked about it and hit on it a little bit, but where and how did the broadcasting side of you come into play? Like, if I would have told you 5-10 years ago, Anthony, you're going to be a radio host on SiriusXM and you're going to be on the ESPN desk while you're in your fighting career, I think you would have called me crazy. Am I wrong?
For sure. Absolutely, I would have. And I kind of fell into it, you know. It honestly, a lot of my broadcast, I would credit Dan Hardy with my broadcasting career 100%. It like I don't know if it would have happened the way that it happened if it wasn't for Dan Hardy. It actually goes back to the Shogun fight. The Shogun fight really changed my entire life. Not only just career-wise as far as fighting, but it was the first time that I'd ever had a conversation with Dan Hardy. He was calling my fight. It was the first time I'd ever fought in Europe, and I was in the fighter meeting with the broadcasting crew, the talent, and the producers and stuff like that. Well, Zach Candido is part of that crew, and he's he runs. Zach is the mastermind behind all the production that goes into into a UFC show. And Dan Hardy, and I was always a big Dan Hardy fan. Like, I loved his style. I loved the way that he fought. I loved the mohawk. I just loved his whole gimmick and who he was. And then as he transitioned into broadcasting, I always liked his mindset and how he thought about fights. And I just had always thought, like, man, I just would love to sit down and have a conversation with that guy and talk fights. And we're sitting in these meetings, and the production crew, the producers are going to be asking you questions, and then the guys that are calling the fight have questions. And honestly, those meetings are usually about 10 to 15 minutes. Dan Hardy and I sat in that meeting speaking to each other for like a half hour, and we were it wasn't just about my fight; it was about some other fights on the card and just fight philosophies in general. And the producers were like, "What in the hell just happened? Like, why didn't we get that on camera? Like, that would have been great, right?" So then the next day they hit me up and they said, "Hey, man, we really enjoyed, like, your and Dan Hardy's chemistry. Do you want, like, would you sit down and do a Facebook Live with him for like 30 minutes? I was like, yeah. So then we did it the next day, and it exploded, dude. It was crazy. Like, everybody loved it. So then from then on, every time I fought, even events that Dan wasn't working, they would bring Dan in, and we would do that 30 to 45 minute sit down, like, little Q&A thing, and people loved it. So then Dan, at the time, he was a SiriusXM host, and he would bring me in every Tuesday after a pay-per-view, and we would do a segment called The Lion's Den, and that was just where we would talk about the pay-per-view, and Dan, and again, it was just another opportunity for Dan and I to sit there and talk about fights. And then from that first initial meeting, Zach Candido was impressed with my ability to kind of talk about fights and gave me an opportunity to work the desk, and it just flourished from there. But had Dan Hardy and I never had that very first initial conversation, I don't know what any of this looks like.
That's incredible. I got to ask this, though. As a current fighter, and obviously sometimes you're up on the desk with other fighters, and you know the business more than most. Some people have to put on a persona or an act or do their shtick while they're up there. You ever find yourself in weird, awkward positions when you're up there?
No, not really. I've interviewed Dominic Reyes. I've interviewed John Jones. I've interviewed Daniel Cormier. I've interviewed guys that I've picked against, and they've had to stand up there with me after they won. It's just part of the job, man. And that's the hardest part, is I'm still active. So I still see these guys in a lot of social situations. And some fighters get in their feelings about it, and they're like, well, you picked against me. And listen, at the end of the day, sometimes I pick against you because Prashad and I keep picking the same guy. Right. And it's like, we got to switch it up, so I'll just take the other guy. It's that part. All my analysis is 100% correct. All my feelings about the fight and how it may or may not go, 100% correct. The way that I break you down as a fighter, what you're good, what you're not good at, and those types of details, that's 100% truthful, at least from where I see it, and that's 100% my opinion. But when it comes down to the fight picks, some of those are bullshit. Sometimes like Rashad or Usman or whoever, sometimes we'll just make it a game and pick against each other because we don't actually know. I can tell you, if this is how the fight goes, here's who I think is going to win. But if it doesn't go this way, this is how it's going to win. But this is an analyst show. I have to pick. So if I don't know, sometimes I'll flip a coin. I just don't know all the time. I don't know whose game plan is whose weight cut was better, whose game plan is going to work. Did you have a bad training camp? Did you bang your knee up or something? I don't know. I'm not going to sit up there and tell these people that I know exactly who's going to win this fight. I can tell you to a pretty close, I'm very confident in my ability to tell you which way the fight goes if this happens and which way, you know what I mean? I can give you a pretty clear path of how it could go, but I don't actually know who's going to win it. So these fighters do get in their feelings sometimes. Michael Chiesa upset with me one time because I picked RDA, but it is what it is, you know what I mean? But no one's ever been disrespectful. No one's ever been disrespectful because I think even in my analysis and some of those situations, I've always been respectful. And I think that at this point in my career, with as many fights as I've had and the things that I've been able to do and the way that I've carried myself, I think people have a respect for me regardless if they agree or disagree with what I'm saying. I've never come at an analyst and been upset with them for what their opinion was on the fight, except for RJ. RJ Clifford is the only time I've ever kind of came at someone with a little bit of anger about something they said, and it wasn't about anything he said before the fight. It was something he said after. And that's the only time it's ever happened, and even then I was respectful about it. So I think people respect me. I think they respect my opinion, whether they agree with it or not. So I haven't had too many kind of weird, awkward situations.
I've got two more because I really, really thank you for all your time. Part of this is that I don't want to be the clickbait guy, so there's other things I have questions on. But I got it, and I know for a fact you don't remember this. But I remember mentioning to you how you predicted the Rashad fight, and then you called. For those that don't know, because I know I've said it to you off air, I was sitting down with Anthony, and we talked about the Rashad fight, and it was right as the recording was getting ready to end. And then after it had ended, I said, how do you see the Rashad fight going? You said, first round knockout, probably. And then you mentioned other fighters that you would like to fight in the light heavyweight division. You said Sam Alvey would be a fun fight. You said Shogun would be a fun fight. I said, wow, Shogun, how do you see that one going? You're like, I'd probably get the job done pretty quick. That'd be another knockout. And then maybe go fight for the title after that. Literally, that's literally what happened. But going back to the Rashad fight, and I know clear on you don't remember this, but I got really hooked up with tickets by someone in the UFC for that fight. And I remember running over to the side as you were exiting the cage and going down the ramp, and I yelled to Coach Montoya and I yelled to you just to get your attention. And you literally looked at me and said, I told you so. I told you so. And it was right after that I was like, this guy can go on and fight whoever, whenever, and wherever in any weight class. I'm always going to fully believe in him because he believed in himself and he told me what he was going to go do, and he went out and did it. I just wanted to get that out there because I think it's so incredible. And I think it speaks to the character of who you are.
You know, I've actually done that in a couple situations too. Where, like, and that's what it's about, man. It's about the ultimate belief in yourself. There's a lot. I mean, if you go back and look at my career and you look at the trajectory that I've taken and some of the bumps that I've had on the road, like, I even believed in myself then. I 100% believed in myself that I was going to beat John Jones, and you know, whatever happened, and I'll get back to it. But you know, if you watch the Shogun finish, I walk straight to Dan Hardy, point at him, and say the exact same thing. I told you so. Like, I told you exactly what was going to happen. And that's kind of the basis on Dan and I's relationship. Like, I was very clear about what I told Dan I thought was going to happen. Like, I'm pretty good about, like, I know myself, and I think a lot of that comes down to being honest with yourself. If I would have told you that I was going to go out there, I was going to shoot a blast, double take Rashad down past his guard and grind him out, like, that's probably unrealistic. Right?
Yeah.
So, but that's what some people do. That's what some people do because they don't have an accurate assessment of themselves. I'm very comfortable with who I am as a fighter. I'm not the cleanest tactician out there. Like, I'm not. Like, can I fight like that? Like, anybody who's seen me train knows that like, I have very, very clean technical Muay Thai, and that I have very, very, like, high level sport jiu-jitsu, like I'm a very high level black belt in the gi, and I can play all those positions, and it's different though when you're in there, and that's not how I fight. Like, people would be shocked if they see me train. Like, they'd be like, who the hell is this guy? It's just different when you get in there, you know. Like, that's the things I have to do to sharpen each one of those tools individually. But when you mold those together and you put them in the melting pot and they go together, my fight style is different. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that, like, I'm a pressure fighter. I'm a pressure fighter, and it's not physical pressure, it's mental pressure. I'm always in your face, and I'm always throwing something in front of you. And even if it looks to you on the outside like I'm not doing anything, the fighter in front of me is nervous. They're uncomfortable with the way that I move and the subtleties that I do, like, and that's okay. And it's not always the priest. Go watch my Vulcan fight. Like, at the beginning, I started slow, and you know, it was an odd fight, and the things that I was trying to do wasn't working, and I just had to kick it back to the old school, the old me, and I had to. Sometimes you gotta let the dog off the leash and make it a dog fight and make it ugly, and I'm just confident that, like, there's not a lot of people that can play that game with me. Like, I can dog fight with the best of them, and like, in those situations, I knew that, like, here's how the Rashad fight's going to go. He has to take me down, or at least he has to try. He has to clinch me because he can't stand on the outside and play a game of Russian roulette for too long, and he knows that. And the Shogun thing, like, I know that Shogun is going to throw wild, crazy punches, and I know that he doesn't have the chin to get into an exchange with me. And I was confident in my own ability to take his shot to give my own, and that's the position I put myself in. Kind of a roll of the dice, because that's not always the case, but that's how I fight, and I'm comfortable with that.
That's another one. It's like, honestly, I'm so, and obviously in media, you're not supposed to be attached, you're not supposed to have favorites. But that's another story, Anthony Lionheart-Smith story I have. You fought Vulcan. I screamed so loud during that fight when you won at the end, when you got the finish. The owner of the bar bought everybody in house a round of shots. Like, we all just celebrated your win. Like, I just love your story and the way you carry yourself. So my last two questions here for you. You talked about, if you didn't believe you could beat John Jones, you wouldn't. Why would you be doing this? After being in there with him already and seeing how, you know, the top of the division is starting to play itself out, what is it that you see in yourself, not what you see from John, but in yourself, that you know with another opportunity you can beat the light heavyweight champion?
You know, I'm kind of like, I don't want to sit here and make excuses, but I think it's clear to everyone from the outside, but I wasn't me when I was in there, right? So I think just being me is enough. I really do. I think just, and honestly, I've gotten a lot better since then, and I just need to go and just be myself. And I wasn't myself in there, and I didn't have the ability to be myself when I was in there. And I think just that pressure and that ability to walk forward and just put that pressure on John is my biggest asset. And then the rest of the game comes into play. Like John, he had a harder time taking me down than I think he had a lot of people. You know, like he didn't shoot any takedowns on Thiago, I guess, so that doesn't really come into play. But like, I don't have any problem being on the ground with John Jones, and he knows that. Like his jiu-jitsu coach knows me. Like we know each other, and there's a reason John didn't engage the grappling with me. So I think just keep putting the pressure on, and I don't give a shit what anybody says. Like I have the power in either hand to shut anybody off. It's just I never got to that opportunity with John Jones. And I'm not going to make any excuses, but like I feel like I got 25 minutes of data on John Jones, and he didn't get a whole lot out of me. And I think that's an advantage, you know. And I've never lost a rematch, ever. Never happened. So I don't plan for it to start with John Jones.
You can sign me up for that rematch. And I know you said later on you want to write that long form, you know, some story about yourself, or maybe have someone document it. I'm actually going to take a shot at it. That's why I wanted to have you on for now over 30 minutes. And I'll end it with this. I know it's not over yet. Obviously, you know where you want to go, and you believe that once you get the opportunity, you will make the most of it. You obviously have everything right there in front of you, and you have a broadcasting career that is going incredibly well for you, and I think you'll continue to only thrive in that role and inside the cage even more. But when you look back, if you had to sum it up right now, especially in the face of all of this chaos going on in the world, how would you describe the story of Anthony Smith?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I just always hoped that, and this is something I've always hoped. Like I hope that people look at my career and they use it as an opportunity to I want them to use it as motivation. And like I'm a small town kid from Nebraska. Like I come from nothing, you know. Like I wasn't extraordinary anywhere in my life. I never have been. I just work really, really hard. You know, some people are born with natural talent and they're born and they start their careers on second base. And some of us, like I've always connected with blue collar America, with the blue collar workers. You know, I was a concrete finisher all the way until I was like my third fight in the UFC before I was able to quit working. You know, I just hope that people look at my story and hope that I hope they look at my story and think like he's just a regular guy that just works really hard. That's what it comes down to, you know. Like I've always, you know, we were talking about John Jones, but like I think you can use a couple guys in those examples. Like I'm not saying John Jones doesn't work hard, but he was absolutely born with tools and talents and abilities that the rest of us weren't. So I'll tell you a quick little story before we get done. The one time that anyone's ever said anything to me that's ever like in the build up to a fight or trash talk or whatever, the one time anyone's ever said anything to me that actually stuck with me and bothered me was when John Jones in his media day, the Wednesday before we fought, was answering a question about my experience advantage that I have over him. And he said, look at how many chances he's had. If Anthony Smith was meant to be great, he would have already been great by now. And like that really stuck with me, you know, like even after, like what the hell does that mean? You know, and you know, after mulling over it for a while, that's kind of when I came to the conclusion that like, you know what, he's right. Like some people are born great, and John Jones was born great. And a lot of other guys in this sport were born great and talented already and didn't have to do a whole lot other than just work hard at getting the skills and stuff refined, and it just comes natural to them. And you know what? That's okay. But the rest of us, me included, have to work hard, and we have to bust our ass, and we have to start at the bottom, and we have to claw our way to the top, and then we have to fight tooth and nail to stay there. And I'm also okay with that. And I think that there's more of me than there is of him. And I think that that's why people relate to me. And I hope that they continue to relate to me, because I'm not one of those people. Like, I'm a normal dude, and I just bust my ass every goddamn day. And I've always had the ultimate belief in myself. And honestly, to be successful in this life, I think that's all you need. I think you need a work ethic. I think you need to believe and love what you're doing, and then just keep putting one foot in front of the other. So, and I hope that that's the story that people take away from my career. It's you don't have to be special, and you don't have to be different. You just have to work especially hard and work different than most people are willing to do. And I guess I got on a soapbox there for a second, but that's how it is, and that's how my mindset is, and that's what I hope people take from my career.
Well, listen, I don't want to be the guy who's like bothering you, especially if you have camp going on, or I know you have a family and you're always busy, whether it be at Sirius or ESPN or preparing for a fight or being a husband and father. But like, you're a guy that I always want to talk to, and it sucked for me because, like I said, last time we talked was UFC 225. And this is exactly why, and I hope that as I edit it, this all out and get it out there, and then take a shot at the longer story, long form feature on you, I hope I do it justice, because, this is, for me, it's a different perspective of how I would like to do my interviews. It seems like yesterday we were talking about the coronavirus, but, that was 30 minutes ago. So I credit you for your mentality, your mindset, and just your self-belief, because I think it's what I actually do connect with you on, because it's something that I personally at times struggle with. That's why at times that I don't interview fighters. But I will also say, as I have a connection with you Nebraska guys. I mean, when I was working around football, one of my closest people, and I've said this to you before, is one of my closest friends is Zach Miller, formerly of the Bears, a guy you know well. So I have a connection with you two, and you guys have all the self-belief, So I thank you, because I think talking to you and having you on the show and the times that I've had you on in the past have made me more motivated and had made me become better at interviewing and writing, because the story is so great to tell. So more than anything for me, it's
no worries, man. And any time, you don't have to worry about reaching out to me. I'll always make time. I think sometimes I like to think I'm busier than I actually am. So, no worries, man. You reach out, and sometime me and you and Zach will have to do something together. That'd be a cool show.
Yeah, no, that'd be dope. And I hope you're not mad, because I was really like, I'm in Jersey right now, and I'm trying to lock in my own apartment, which would be the first time I have my own apartment in my entire life. I mean, I had one for a year, and then the ex-girlfriend ruined all that, so that was great. But trying to lock down, having my dream job at Sirius, having my own place, but I was going to put that all on hold to travel to Lincoln. But now, given this, so I hope I get a pass on this one. But if your next fight after this is in the States, I'll do what I can to make sure I go.
All right, I'll make you a deal. You make it there, I'll make sure I got a ticket for you.
All right, that works for me. Anthony Lionheart-Smith, I thank you. This was a great conversation. And while there are certain things that other people are going to want to hear, I can't wait to write this story up. And I look forward to seeing what's next. So hopefully we get to see you fight exactly a month from now on April 25th.
Sounds good to me, man. You take care of yourself. Stay in touch.
That was Anthony Lionheart-Smith. What a conversation. And look, there's going to be things that I will write on and touch on with this, which is the coronavirus and his thoughts on fighting throughout this worldwide pandemic. But what such transparency from him. I mean, this is a story of a guy who was in the UFC cut, had to wear a hat, at a regional show and call out Dana White to sign him again. Went to middleweight. Things weren't going his way. Moved up to light heavyweight. And we've seen this success ever since. And just because he lost one fight to John Jones does not mean it is over for Anthony Smith. He's not a gatekeeper. He's not someone to just kind of keep the line moving at light heavyweight. I'm very excited, even more so after talking to him about what the future holds for him. And hopefully it all continues to go on April 25th, whether it's in Lincoln, Nebraska or not, against Glover Teixeira. I think it's going to be a hell of a fight. I think it sets Anthony up with future title implications, as he kind of noted. And it's a great story, and it's one that hopefully, as I said to Anthony, I can do justice in writing and telling to everyone. But that was Anthony Lionheart Smith. I am Mike Pendleton. You can follow me on Twitter at MP2310. A lot more coming your way this week. Listen, there's a lot of fighters that want to talk right now, a lot of fighters that are going through a lot of things, and I'm trying to bring them all to you. So keep it locked here on the On the Mic podcast. I am Mike Pendleton. Again, Twitter at MP2310, Instagram at MikeP2310. Please subscribe to this podcast. And as always, we'll see you soon.